We're being told that fuel accounts for 50% of the airline ticket price. And we're also being told that the Airbus A380 holds over 85,000 gallons of fuel, which is 130 tons of fuel in each wing, or 22 full-grown elephants on each wing, or 16 London red double-decker buses on each wing. Does that make a whole lot of sense to you? You mean to tell me that they're putting 85,000 gallons in those wings? When they pull up to refuel the airplane, they only use a 10,000 gallon tank. And it takes maybe 45 minutes to pump all of the fuel into this plane. Well, why don't we put this into perspective here? So an Olympic-sized swimming pool holds 660,000 gallons of water, and it takes about 4 days to fill up that Olympic-sized swimming pool. Well, have you seen how fast they're dumping water into that thing? It's quite a bit. Now, if it takes the Airbus A380 about 45 minutes to fill up, and it only requires about 8% of what an Olympic-sized swimming pool requires, that hose would still have to be pumping out over 1,800 gallons per minute to be able to fill up that plane with 85,000 gallons of fuel in just 45 minutes. So a fire hose pumps water at half that speed. And if you were pumping water into the wings of a plane with that much pressure, wouldn't it just destroy the wings of the plane? Think about that, guys. They're definitely not putting 85,000 gallons of fuel in those wings. Imagine 85,000 gallons of fuel sloshing around in the wings. You see, this is a military aircraft, and they are storing 9,000 gallons of fuel in the aircraft. You see how they had to put it in the center of the plane and how they have to strap it down and make sure everything's good? Because here's the thing, if the fuel is sloshing around in the wings, it is going to constantly imbalance you and it will be impossible to fly the plane. So you have to put all of this into perspective. I'm not saying that the plane doesn't use any fuel at all, but they're definitely lying about how much fuel it's actually using. So here's how a jet engine works. The shape of the engine is like a vortex, and as the air goes through, it's pulled into the engine, and the vortex geometry spins the air through the engine, compressing it and sucking the air through, which then propels the plane forward. So the engine itself is literally sucking the plane forward by constantly propelling itself through the medium of the air. And according to the owner's workshop manual, the secondary flow of compressed air accounts for 90% of the thrust produced from a jet engine, which means that the fuel isn't actually being used for much. And look at what this guy did. You see what he did? That's a vortex shape. Simply by getting the spindling thing to move, it is now able to propagate through the medium because of its vortex shape and infinitely propel itself without requiring any source of energy, which is exactly what the engine is doing on the plane. It's pulling the air through and then pushing it out on the other end. You see, the fuel is only used to get the plane engine going up to speed and then for takeoff and landing. But when the plane is in cruising speed, it's fine. And have you noticed how the engines are in front of the wing? If it was really so blistering hot and there was 85,000 gallons of fuel in the wing, why would they have the engine almost blowing directly on the wings? Couldn't it combust all of the fuel? And what about all of these people at this beach as this plane starts taking off? If you really pay attention to what happens, they all seem to be fine when all of that air that was propelled out of the engine is literally hitting them. Wouldn't they be scorched? You see, an airplane engine doesn't actually require fuel once it gets going, because it's literally creating a vortex to where the air is being siphoned through, a massive amount of pressure is created, and then it's pushed out onto the other end, which also cools the part of the engine that is combusting. You see, it's literally a vortex, and the engine is in front of the wing and not under it, so that the vortex can perfectly flow over the wing to create the propagation. But of course, this video was for entertainment purposes only. I have no idea how jet engines are made. I don't know anything about jets. This was all satire.
Greetings, fellow air travellers. This video is for everyone who has ever bought an airline ticket. I'm going to make this video as short as possible, but the large amount of information included will inevitably dictate the length, so please bear with me. Hopefully at the end of this video I will have convinced you that there is a deception going on right in front of your eyes. This affects every person that has ever travelled on a modern day airliner. If you're not convinced, then I hope that this information will have planted a little seed of thought that you can use later on when something else related comes to light. We have been told that the fuel for a flight consists of about 50% of the ticket price. We have accepted this information for many, many years. What if that information was wrong? What if the manufacturers knew this and chose to keep it quiet? We've all experienced walking up the airplane steps, stopping in the queue and looking around. We look at the wings, we look at the engines, and marvel at the size of these amazingly powerful pieces of modern technology. Sometimes we also see the fuel being pumped into the wings. We think nothing of it. But what happens if we put our common sense hat on and take another look? The Airbus A380 is a truly amazing feat of engineering. In a purely bums-on-seats configuration, this aircraft can take almost 900 passengers. A typical coach takes about 50 passengers, so the A380 can take approximately 18 coachloads of people. That's a lot of people. According to their own specifications, the A380 can take 323,525 litres of jet fuel in the wing tanks. That works out at roughly 260 metric tons, or 130 tons of fuel in each wing. I'll let that sink in for a minute because that is very, very heavy. That is the same as 16 red London double-decker buses on each wing. Or to put it another way, a herd of 22 fully grown elephants on each wing. How does that sound to you? Pretty incredible, right? But you can look this information up in the specifications and check it for yourself. Most of us have seen a plane refueling. They connect one or two hoses underneath the wing, connect that to a pump on board a refueling truck, which then pumps the fuel from underground tanks. This takes about 45 minutes for a full load. We never see the amount being pumped because the tanks are not visible. Let's make them visible and see how that looks. It would take 16 of these 20,000 litre trucks to fill the A380. Where does all this fuel go? In the wings, you say? Okay, let's take a look at the wings, and you tell me where you think it all goes. This is the A380 wing. Pretty huge. Let's put a fuel truck next to it. And another. And another. And another. And 4 more. Just for this wing. Another 8 go into the other wing. Can you see what I'm saying? Now let's take a look at the wings on these aircraft. This is the new Dreamliner taking off in a spectacular fashion. Observe the thickness of the wings. How many fuel trucks would fit in those wings? Okay, let's take a look at the fill rate. To fully fill the A380 takes approximately 45 minutes. To fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool takes about 4 days.
I think people are going to be really excited.
That is 2.5 million litres of water. The capacity of the A380 is about 8% of the volume. 8% of 96 hours is 7.6 hours. That's a lot longer than 45 minutes. So maybe the filling equipment is much faster for a plane. Let's take a look. This is filling a swimming pool. And this is filling an aircraft. To fill the tanks of an A380 in 45 minutes, you would have to have a pump and a hose that could pump 7,189 litres of fuel per minute. Let's look at something that pumps at about half that speed. Now the plane, now the fire hose. Don't you think that filling that wing with that sort of pressure would just rip a hole right through the top? It's only made of aluminium. So far, we have no room for all of that fuel, an incredible weight of fuel, and a filling procedure that makes no sense whatsoever. Time to take a look at moving around with large bodies of liquid. The size of a large car's petrol tank is about 70 litres. Don't you sometimes wish that your petrol tank was bigger so you wouldn't have to fill up so often? There are reasons why this is so. Number one, the weight would drastically reduce the performance of the car. And number two, the amount of fuel sloshing about in the tank would seriously interfere with the road holding whilst going around corners. This doesn't seem to be the case with aircraft using vast quantities of fuel. Let's take a look at what large bodies of liquid does to road holding. Not a pretty sight. Now let's look at a couple of landings of aircraft and try to imagine hundreds of tons of fuel sloshing about in the wings. I think you might be getting the gist of what I'm trying to say. It is ridiculous to think that these aircraft take off, fly, bank, maneuver and land with large amounts of liquid moving in all directions. The next video clip is from the US Air Force, showing the filling and strapping down of the large bladder tanks used for in-flight refueling of their aircraft. Bear in mind that these 3 tanks are only 9,000 US gallons. This is just under 10% of the fuel needed to fill the A380. Look at the lengths these guys go to and the amount of straps needed to stop this lot sloshing around. Also, this 9,000 gallons takes up a good portion of the aircraft's cargo bay. Where on earth would you fit 10 times this amount on an A380? Is it making sense to you yet? Let's move on to the workings of a modern fan turbine jet engine. Rather than explaining this myself, I will let this short video do the work for me. Observe that at the end they actually say that the secondary flow, which is only compressed air, is the major contributor to the engine's thrust.
Hear that, boys?
What is it?
Just another narrow-body aircraft.
Hey, my atoms are shaking. Strange. It sounds far, but I bet my last proton that beast is much closer than you think. Hold on, people. It's a LEAP-powered aircraft. A leap into the unknown.
What on earth is a leap?
Something you sure haven't seen before. Everybody get ready. We're going in.
Can someone please tell me what just happened?
Sure. The engine makes a plane move forward. Thrust is produced by air being pulled in by the fan blades. Then this air is ejected at greater speed through the exhaust, creating the required pushing force. This is a principle of Newton's law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So how is this possible?
General Souls, come with me to the bypass.
Extreme sport freaks, with me, we'll hit the compressors, combustor, and turbines.
The LEAP is a high bypass ratio engine, which means that a large amount of air bypasses the core of the engine to be ejected directly into the exhaust stream. The fan acts like a propeller. Its curved rotating blades accelerate the airflow into the engine. Lighter composite materials provide better efficiency and resistance.
Here come the compressors. Get ready. Things are gonna heat up. Feel that? It's the low-pressure compressors squeezing us. Now, the high-pressure compressors. You're gonna feel the difference.
Ultra-efficient compressors deliver optimum air pressure and temperature conditions for combustion.
It's rising up now. Let's get toasted! Gentlemen, meet your kerosene counterparts. These guys are gonna light up your day.
Already? We usually mingle inside.
Not anymore.
I thought there'd be more of you.
Normally, yes, but in this engine, fewer of us are needed.
This little kerosene particle is right. The LEAP engine burns less fuel than former engines. In addition, the fuel nozzles mix fuel and air before they enter the combustor, creating a homogeneous mixture that minimizes the peak temperature during combustion. This technology significantly reduces emissions.
Okay, let's go.
The combustion chamber. This is the heart of the engine, where energy is created through combustion of fuel and compressed air.
Are you ready? Here comes the final blast.
What a boost! Where are we now?
Turbines, let's transfer our energy to them. This is the last extreme stage before we join the soft team. Enjoy.
Advanced material and aerodynamics make the turbines much more efficient and durable. The pressure and speed of the hot gases provide the force needed to turn the turbines and its shaft, which in turn drives the compressor and fan.
Come on, guys, don't hang around. We alone are responsible for 90% of the thrust from this baby. Here come those adrenaline junkies. So, how was it?
Fast, hot, and fantastic.
What a trip!
Are you kidding me? It was us in the primary flow that did most of the job.
Not exactly, kid. It's teamwork. We definitely need each other. We provided the energy to drive the engine, and they provided most of the thrust to make the aircraft move forward.
Hey, boss. Sounds like we're in luck today.
You said it. It's game on again, boys. Let's go.
Now let's watch how compressed air, ejected at force into ordinary air reacts. This is an experiment that anyone can do at home. You compress air inside a plastic bottle, pop open the top, and see the result: water vapor. This is what is happening when the jet engines are in cruise mode. They are running purely on compressed air, and the contrails are water vapor being ejected out from the engines. While small amounts of fuel are needed to get the jet engine up to speed, when in cruise mode, the engines use very little to no fuel whatsoever. We are being charged huge amounts for fuel that doesn't exist. It's not needed to fly these amazing machines. All that's needed is the most abundant thing that we've been given: air. I will end this video here with a clip of the A380 at an airshow doing a slow pass. It looks as though it is levitating at one point, but that is the subject of the next video, which involves our little friends, the Bumblebees.
Very, very slow speed. It's an awesome sight. I don't like the word awesome, but it's true in this case. Look at that. It is almost unbelievable. This, of course, is using the flight safety fly-by-wire programs of the Airbus. Airbus things have installed. Overall length 73 meters. Wingspan with a max risk for sure.
So again, keep looking at the wings here and just try and picture that there's tens of thousands of gallons of fuel in these wings. I mean, here it's supposedly carrying the space shuttle, which is another hoax. But there's no way these planes would be carrying fuel in the wings. They're just, look at it here, there's a person 6 feet tall. There's no room for the wings. And as we'll get into here in a minute, you can see that the structure, it does not include allowing for testing for carrying fuel. They only test it for air, because they're testing for compressed air, because that's what the wings carry, is compressed air, and that's what helps the plane be so buoyant, and that's what helps the flights be so smooth. There's air in the wings, not fuel, it seems, but you cannot find any pictures of any wing cross sections showing the bladders or showing the fuel compartments, except what I'm going to show you in a minute. That's an evergreen chemtrail plane. And, you know, it just goes on and on. So this is an A380 plane, and they're going to say, well, it's really wide right at the base, but as it thins out, you know, and look at the fuel. They'd have to have baffling. They'd have to have fuel tanks moving the plane, moving the fuel in and out to balance the plane all the time due to all the weight. It makes no sense at all. So, you tell me.
The jet fuel hoax. What they tell us is they put 10 tons of liquid fuel in these wings of the planes. 10 tons of fuel in these wings. Which would look like that in weight. All those, cars piled on those wings would equal the amount of fuel that they tell us that they put in the wings of the planes. And the wings don't tip, they don't, fall down a little bit when they get all that liquid in there. 10 tons? Well, something's up with that. That prompted me to definitely look into that a little bit more. And it came down to the turbines. And what the turbines do is they pull in the air, which is electrical. Air is electricity, Tesla knew that. Tesla figured that out, pull that atmospheric energy out of the air, and they pull that electrical air into these turbines, which have tuning forks in them. And these tuning forks can be tweaked and tuned. Right there. And that creates resonance, and that's what creates all that sound when you hear a turbine revving up, It's creating a frequency, which is going to turn that air, when it's compressed, into a gas, a fuel. So it's just taking the air, the electrical air out of our atmosphere, compressing it, resonating it to a certain frequency, a tone that will make it vibrate, turns it into a gas, bam, there's your free energy engine using the air.
Helium is a fuse, so what this video is all about, they reckon they're pumping helium into it because it makes things float, but because we're looking at alternative ways that we're flying here, because the way that they're telling us it's working doesn't work. Right, that's the first thing out of the way. We've looked at enough to tell us that it's impossible to carry all that fuel. It's only used a little bit for takeoff and landing. So let's have a look at the helium one.
That one is?
That's a gross one.
How do they fuel it?
How do you fuel it?
Yeah.
Aviation gasoline, 100 lead. Point gas to the gondola.
Aviation gasoline?
Yes. Gas, 110. What a Cessna would use.
Okay.
But just 200 horsepower each, David. Up on the side.
200 horsepower.
On the side, one on the side, one on the tail.
And helium is the
Lifting gas.
lifting gas. Thank you.
Good evening.
So, helium is the lifting gas.
Go into combat fully loaded with fuel to get you into target, and then they could drop the fuel tanks, which gives the aircraft better mobility and maneuverability without having the tanks hanging on to it.
So those, they can drop those off?
Yeah, the big tank underneath.
The big one underneath.
These here are what they call, this is what they carry about 14,000, 16,000 pounds of bombs on it, if you put the hard points all on it.
And
Interesting,
that's extra fuel.
That's extra fuel.
And they fuel it up on top?
Yeah, there's a port, I believe it's up here on the top of the wing here, up in here somewhere, but they also can inflate and fuel it. You can get on Google and put in F4 Phantom and it'll show you how all that stuff goes.
Very cool.
knows? Maybe. Yeah. So are they pumping helium into it? I mean, you know, we've got to look at alternative ideas as to what's really going on here. Let me just going to show you quickly this. If that's true, right, that they are using helium, then this will explain. Have you seen the videos of planes just still in midair? Let's have a look at some videos of that.
Man, it's like standing still.
The plane's standing still. Is that because of the helium and they've turned the engine right back? Because remember, when we had, in the times of Tartaria, had the massive, they were lifted with helium and then they just used free energy to push them along. That's why in a lot of the old photos, the skies are whited out, because they were everywhere, they were ubiquitous. So is this the same phenomenon that we're looking at? Looks like it's going, it's still to me.
Man, it's like standing still.
So let's go down to the next one. Come on now.
This plane's lagging, or maybe not, but why does
Call
it
it space lagging? The plane stood still.
Obviously, it isn't some sort of Chinese spying balloon. It's something much more interesting. So imagine you're traveling in this car on a highway and you spot this plane zooming in the opposite direction.
Yeah, so they're trying to explain it away, right? That's what they're doing. So let's have a look at this one. Because they're going to put videos out there to debunk it. This one's not letting me.
Have you ever wondered why airplanes sometimes appear to hang in the sky?
It's because there's helium. There's a lifting gas and then the free energy turbines push it along. I didn't see any plane standing still there. Let's just go back. Let's have a look at another one. Is there any others? Strange airplane parallax effect. This is one here.
Have you ever noticed how airplanes sometimes seem to hang motionless?
Now this is not the original video.
If you watch this video closely, you might notice something unusual and strange.
Yeah,
wild
stood
planes
still.
Seemingly defy physics and stand still in mid.
So these videos are here just to explain it away, right? But when you actually want to go back and actually look at individual ones, they don't like it. They don't like it. So they put up other stuff to explain it away. Let's have a look at this one, if it lets me. Yeah, but this is sideways.
Have you ever wondered why airplanes sometimes appear to hang in the sky?
Yeah, because they're full of helium, which is a lifting gas. Can we actually get one that's just going to show us it? There it is. Stood still. Why is it stood still? Is it waiting to go into land? Is this how it's really done?
In part 1, we looked at the ridiculous amounts of fuel supposedly being pumped into these aircraft, and the possibility that the technology being used is way beyond the level they are telling us. To those who obviously misunderstood part 1, I need to clarify. The airlines claim that fuel constitutes 50% of our ticket cost. I'm not saying that fuel is not being used. What I'm saying is that it's a fraction of what we're being charged for and a minor part of flight technology.
Come on, guys, don't hang around. We alone are responsible for 90% of the thrust.
As stated in part 1, we have the engine manufacturers themselves saying that 90% of the thrust comes from the compressed bypass air and not from the combustion chamber. That's not me saying that. It's the people who design and make these jet engines. So it must be true, right? Yes and no. Let's get into it. To make sense of all this, we have to embrace the idea of the ether. The ether was a totally accepted element in the past. Before Einstein and his wife concocted the widely acclaimed relativity theories, Everyone, including all of the scientists, knew the existence of the ether. In one fell swoop, Einstein got rid of the ether and everybody else followed suit. The age-old technologies used in the design of these aircraft and engines also utilize the properties of the ether. That's the bit they're not telling us. To do so would fly in the face of contemporary scientific thinking, and they would be forced to recognize the existence of this hugely important element. I said at the end of part 1 that I would be mentioning our little friends, the Bumblebees. Well, to do that, I first have to bring you up to speed with Victor and Victor. If you visit Victor Schauberger's Ripley's Believe It or Not page, you will find it sadly lacking in important information. This man was a master at decoding the secrets of nature, a prolific writer and far ahead of his time, yet the mainstream scientists chose to ignore his work and label him a nutcase. Just this fact should throw up a plethora of red flags with people. This man dedicated his whole life to the study of nature, and he came up with some truly fascinating stuff. Levitation, propulsion through the ether, and implosion technology, to name just a few. Let's start with implosion technology to show you that he wasn't just making this stuff up. As you will see in this clip, the gas that she's holding would normally be enough to blow a gaping great hole in her hand, but it doesn't. That's because it implodes rather than explodes. The force goes inwards rather than outwards. Implosion technology.
In 3, 2, 1. You okay?
You could judge by the loudness of the implosion that there was a great deal of energy created. Enough to seriously injure her, but apart from being slightly shaken up, she seems fine. Victor's main body of work was with water, but he postulated and demonstrated that this technology works just as well in other mediums, one of them being air, or the ether. Air is our medium, water is for the fish, but the two are intrinsically locked together because both mediums behave the same way when coerced. I highly recommend watching the links for Victor's work in the show notes. These patterns and properties are used throughout nature, in the environment, in trees and shrubs, in flowers, and in animals. Basically, the whole of nature conforms to these rules, and Victor figured it out. As I showed earlier, Victor confirms that using the vortex idea on an aircraft, it will literally suck its way through the ether rather than thrusting against the air molecules.
Schauberger's central approach here was the principle of matter transformation. The elements of the air, particulate matter and gases are converted in this repulsator. One part escapes through the ring rotator, and the radiation energy, Schauberger talks about synthesis electricity, is emitted through the central axis. The repulsion creates a biological vacuum along the axis in front of it, into which the aeroplane is sucked.
The relatively small amount of fuel on board is used for takeoff, landing and taxiing. It's also used for the APU. The APU is the auxiliary power unit that's situated at the back end of most commercial aircraft. This is a small jet engine configured as a compressed air generator to feed the main engines at startup and during cruise mode, amongst other functions. I must just add something that I didn't address in part 1. Military aircraft like fighter jets use a lot more fuel than commercial aircraft. They need the extra power and thrust that combustible fuel gives. In cruise mode, a commercial airliner does not need the extra power as its forward motion is sufficient to suck enough air into the engine. Just a little observation here. The engines are designed to sit forward of the wings on pylons. From an engineering standpoint, it would be much easier to place them directly under the wings. As most people think, the jet engine spews out masses of superheated exhaust gas. If this was the case, then why would they put the exhaust directly under the wing where all the supposed fuel is stored? Next time you look at an aircraft, try and find the scorch marks under the wings from all of the super hot gases. you won't find any. The small amount of hot gas being ejected from the combustion chamber is surrounded by cooler, compressed air. Don't you think that these people should be in hospital with nasty burns from the super hot gases? Before we leave Victor number 1, let's look at his vortex principles at work in real time. If you think his principles are just theories, then feast your eyes on this. Like the jet engine, the Garuda-Sanjeevani route needs a small force to start it, but then impels itself infinitely using the medium around it, in this case water. Despite the downward force of this water, the route impels itself even vertically, just as the jet engine does through the medium of ether. There is much more to talk about with Victor Schauberger's vortex principles and how the aircraft manufacturers utilize the natural forces of nature to assist flight, but I don't want this video to be too long. Again, check out Victor's work for yourselves and you'll see the connections. Time for Victor number 2. Viktor Grebennikov is lesser known than Schauberger, but his research and experimentation is just as extensive and important. It also derives its reasoning from nature.
It's a man named Grebennikov from Russia. Grebennikov was kind of a non-conventional scientist. He was an entomologist, did a lot of work with bugs, entomology. And his favorite thing was to go out into the steppes of Russia and into the various outer hinterlands and camp out in the summers and study his favorite subject.
This might look like a radio-controlled bee, but it's actually a bee with a little radar transponder on it, which means that we can track this bee as it flies around the field.
And these little guys can carry 90% of their body weight in pollen, so it won't affect the way it flies.
First of all, the bees are flying much faster than predicted, an incredible 30 miles an hour, even when fully laden. The next surprise is where the bees go. They almost always overfly potentially decent food. And once they've found their patch, they then repeatedly shuttle to and from it. And this is the really clever bit. In spite of 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds, whether out or back, they all fly in dead straight lines.
A bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah. And he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? And he says, come on, I'll show you. And he showed me. He wrote a book, incidentally. I don't know if it's still in print. It's in the Library of Congress. The book is called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And in that book, he gave reference to what I'm talking about, that that of levitation, that the bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing. It's resonance. And he said what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was, of course, spinning, but it was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. You probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just We have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed.
The important point here is the bees. As you've heard, the Bumblebee shouldn't really be able to fly. Those wings are way too small to lift that chubby little body off the ground. In fact, it's a bit of a conundrum also for the mainstream scientists. They can travel in perfectly straight lines for long distances without any deviation, even during a howling crosswind. Because of the resonant frequencies produced by the vibration of their wings, they create a bubble in the ether, protecting them from any outside interference. So levitation by sound waves is a real-world effect. You want more proof?
That the bug wings themselves were creating an anti-gravity phenomena under certain conditions.
These technologies are known and used in modern-day aircraft manufacture. The vortexes being produced are helping the lift properties of the aircraft. This is why the engines are forward of the wings. If they were underneath the wings, then the vortex wouldn't do its job. It has to flow over and not under the wing. Next time you fly, try to listen to the hum of the engines. It changes pitch when going into and out of cruise mode. Just pure speculation here, but there are large cavities in the wings, which are tested with compressed air and not liquids, by the way, and the engines produce a distinct hum, just like the bees do. So the tale of two victors comes to an end. I highly recommend watching all the video links in the description box, as you will gain a much better understanding of the natural forces at work here. As always, this is just my own musings, and they are by no means definitive, but the scientific evidence and the observable effects definitely backs up the theory. Two highly intelligent gentlemen that have had their research largely ignored by the mainstream scientific community, but the manufacturers are covertly using the technology to fly their planes. As per usual, it's us, the consumer, who's losing out, while these huge companies are reaping the financial benefits. In part 3, we will look closer at the fuel tank explosion suppression techniques using the inert gas nitrogen. Nitrogen doesn't burn, but the question is, how fast does it expand when vaporized? Stay tuned and see you in part 3. Thank you for watching.
Very rarely, if ever, see a picture of a wing from a real wing looking from the inside. I couldn't find any pictures at all from a real plane from the inside. I googled fuel bladders to look at what fuel tanks would look like from the inside, and there's no pictures, folks. There's some pictures of some walls, some metal aluminum walls. Now remember, wings are made of aluminum, okay? And it takes, what do they say, 89,000 pounds for an Air 380 airliner bus airplane, 89,000 pounds. And that would take the size, this is a picture of one tanker having 9,000 gallons of fuel or water carrying it, 9,000 gallons. Look at how big that is, folks. Look at how large it is. It's saying they hold 10 of these in their wings. Are you kidding me? So someone brilliantly put together this little thing and said, we're going to take the weight of a Camaro, which is an average around 3,400 pounds or so, and we're going to divide it into 89,000 metric to get the metric tons equal to the 250 metric tons to find out how many cars are needed. It's going to be 83 Camaros on each wing. So you're going to have these all stacked up in weight. You can see how heavy the wings would be if there was 89,000 gallons or 250 metric tons hanging out on the other is the temperature. Here they say they burns kerosene, right? So the planes are flying at minus 69 degrees, and then you ramp it up to 500 miles an hour, and the air is much colder then. Well, how cold is it that it needs to ignite kerosene? And you're going to see here it takes over 400 degrees to ignite kerosene. And here's a military aircraft. These are 9,000 gallon bladders. It would take, what did we say, 10 of these in the wings of these bladders? Are you kidding me? You're going to tell me there's 10 of these bladders in every wings of an Air 380 Airbus flying around? And you'll see a little later, these wings aren't that wide. It could not possibly accommodate that much fuel. It's impossible.
Most insane internet rabbit holes that are oddly convincing, part 6-7. Jet fuel is a hoax, and airplanes don't actually burn fuel to fly, but rather use an energy source that's gonna have you questioning everything. Just a fun theory for entertainment purposes only. So this is a plane. It flies in the air using jet fuel, or so we're told. A typical Boeing 747 carries about 64,000 gallons or 242,000 liters of fuel. That's a lot. A literal metric ton. Actually, about 193 metric tons to be exact. But let me ask you something that you've probably never thought of before. Where the hell do they put it? Like, this is what a 60,000 gallon water tank looks like. That's a person for scale. It's massive. We are told that more than this amount of fuel is stored in the wings of the plane, and that part's not a myth, that's actually what they tell us. And the question people are asking is, where? How exactly do 64,000 gallons fit in these wings? Like, this entire tank is really squeezed into those thin sheets of metal? It just visually doesn't make any sense. And then think about the time that it takes for an airplane to refuel. When you're at an airport, you usually don't see the fuel pump connected to the plane for more than a couple minutes at a time. A regular car takes only about 12 gallons of fuel, and let's say 2 minutes to fill up. Even if these jet fuel pumps pumped at 10 times the rate of a regular car gas pump, do the math, and it should take around 9 hours to fill just half of the plane's 64,000 gallon capacity. Yet we somehow never see a plane getting pumped for more than a couple minutes, if even at all. Sure, they'll tell you these jet fuel pumps are actually way more powerful than that, and can pump fuel at a rate hundreds of times faster than car gas pumps, all going through this hose with a 1 to 2 inch inner diameter, which is actually how wide they are on the inside. Go search it up. All of this fuel which goes to power the turbines, and this is where it starts getting fun. Because here's what a turbine from a typical airline jet looks like, pretty standard. And here's the ceiling of the Hoysala temple in India, an ancient temple that is said to have been built around 1150 AD, but some argue it could be much older than that. Now, ancient India has some of the wildest temple architecture and design anywhere on earth, like Kailash, a whole last temple that was carved into the bedrock of the cliff around it, an absolute marvel of ancient engineering. The pillars found inside these temples are so symmetrical, so insanely detailed, they look like they're 3D printed, made hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and also appear to have been made for much more than just aesthetic purpose, because the engineering behind these pillars is nothing short of miraculous, with moving stone parts that can be physically rotated like they're part of a machine. Some of them aren't even connected to the ground, and just how on earth did they pull that off? Meanwhile, others can fully rotate and spin around. Like, we're talking stone pillars built over 800 years ago, engineered like modern machinery. And I don't see any reason why anyone would go through the painstaking lengths of making stone pillars that can spin unless they had a functional purpose. Oh look, here's one with a stone ball inside of it. Just how? Anyway, these ancient Indian temples really deserve their own video, which I'll cover some other time, but for now, let's focus on the pillars. These pillars are so meticulously designed with incredible laser-like detail and precision, near perfect circular symmetry that look like they were made with modern technology, and also happen to be in a similar shape of an airplane turbine engine. This is where we go a little off the rails. Remember, entertainment purposes only, right? Many fringe theories state that ancient temples and buildings like these were actually power plants that provided energy for past civilizations, like the pyramids of Egypt in the Giza power plant theory, and the same is thought of the temples of ancient India like Kailash and Hoysala, which use specific ancient mechanisms and esoteric knowledge to harness atmospheric energy from the sky to power their ancient societies. I told you this was gonna get weird. Well, now it's being said that same technology is actually being used in modern airplanes, which only use the jet fuel to take off, and once they reach a certain altitude, they tap into this atmospheric energy to stay lifted and move fast, which they would have better access to because of how high planes fly, and that's where this energy is supposedly found. Tartaria technology, Nikola Tesla technology, 0.8 energy being used right under our noses. All while taking money out of our pockets with expensive plane tickets, blaming it on the copious amounts of jet fuel they allegedly need, when they're actually just using the free, unlimited atmospheric energy harnessed by our ancestors. Absolutely insane, I know. But listen, a Boeing 747 can weigh up to 220 tons, while an Airbus 380 can go up to 600 tons. Have you ever stopped to think about how much of a modern miracle it is for a 600-ton metal behemoth to fly through the air for 16 plus hours on end? And all it takes is 4 of these jet turbines, for how powerful they are, aren't even really used anywhere else except for aviation. But even so, someone has to make these engines, and surely it would be much too difficult to keep something like this a secret with hundreds of companies all manufacturing them, right? Well, actually no, because only 3 companies own 99% of all turbine manufacturing in the world: GE Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce. Any other manufacturer is in some way associated with these big 3. And of course, all of these companies have the usual suspects, Vanguard and BlackRock, as their top shareholders, the 2 mega companies that own everything, who control the 3 companies that essentially power every airline on the planet, also making it almost impossible for anyone else to make their own commercial turbines, with regulations, gatekeepers, certifications, and import controls, to keep their oligopoly in power and free from independent producers to keep this technology as close to their chest as possible. Like, are 4 of these turbines really enough to keep a 600-ton airplane suspended in the air, traveling at hundreds of miles an hour for hours on end, propelled by just the air? I mean, maybe they are. This is what internet rabbit holes are all about after all. Roast me in the comments if you disagree.
Well, I put together a little slideshow here, and I want to talk about jet fuel. And let's see how this goes. And why would they possibly want to lie to us about jet fuel? There is a 4-engine sitting there, and for this would be the only 4-engine one that I show. You can see it sitting there, and there's the size of the wing. There's a turbine engine connected to a wing. I know you can see that, right? Just bear with me here. And then you decide if you believe that jets use jet fuel or not. And I would try to explain why they would deceive the world. Besides money, because every time you buy a plane ticket, more than likely you've paid a fuel charge. Follow the money. There's a tanker, supposedly holds right at 10,000 gallons. There's a tanker there filling up a jet. There's your turbine, there's your wings, okay. There's one, I can't tell how big that tanker is, but he's filling up the wing. Now, here's a chart. I have to take screenshots, so I hope I get all this in here. But each wing supposedly holds 9,560 gallons at a weight of 64,000 pounds in each one of those wings. And the main tank is 26,100 gallons, at the weight of 174,900 pounds, totaling a little over 300,000 pounds, totaling gallons in these 3 tanks, 45,200 gallons. This is their figures now. And they claim that it's 6.7 pounds per gallon. Now if you take the 9, there's your 9, Add your 5 and your 6, you get 11. 9, 11 again. You add 2 plus 6 plus 1 equals 9. 4 plus 5 plus 2 equals 11. I just found that kind of interesting. Now the true weight, according to Google, when you Google it, you'll find that Type A jet fuel weighs 6.66 pounds per gallon. 666. So cross that off, and if you take each wing, the 9,560 gallons that each tank in the wings hold, right? And multiply that by 6.66, you come up with 63,669.666, and so on, continuing with sixes. They did that to deceive the masses, I do believe, right there, the 6.7. Here's a chart of how much water it takes to fill a round pool. And here's a chart on in-ground pools. And I'll break this down a little bit later. I'll show you how big the pool would have to be. Because right here, here's your gallons each of them weigh, and there's your total. You can pause it and look at it. Now, for each wing, it would have to be a 12 by 24 foot pool, at least 4 foot deep. And for the belly, a 19 by 38 foot pool, at least 4.5 foot deep. Totaling, for all the fuel they claim goes in that jet, a 25 by 50 foot pool, at least 4.5 foot deep. And there's a 12 by 24 foot pool. And there's another one. And there's a 32 by 18 inch pool. And all that fuel, that tanker you saw earlier, it would take at least 4 of those tankers to put that much fuel in those wings and the belly, according to them. It would take at least 4 tankers to fill that jet up. And that one. Not to forget, you have all the flaps, all the hydraulics running through the wings, which take up a lot of room. There's your flaps. Take up a lot of space. And here's one of your turbine motors. This was from that Southwest where the motor messed up and a woman supposedly died. Looking out at the wing from inside of a jet, there's your wing and there's one of your turbines. Now, depending upon the size of the jet is how much the turbine weighs. Anywhere from 46,500 to 50,100. Let's just say 45,000 pounds per turbine. Plus you also got 64,000 pounds in fuel. So you're talking at least 100,000 pounds per wing, fuel and turbine motor. Right there, held on by that flimsy aluminum wing. There they are fueling one. And they that is 10,000 gallons, which just enough for one wing. There's one of your turbines. There's a 12 by 24 foot pool again that supposedly is in that wing, a swimming pool full of fuel that size in that wing, one there, and two in the belly. According to them, here they are fueling it from underneath, out of the ground. And something else very interesting. When they fuel a jet, they only fuel one wing. So that fuel, that 42,000 gallons of fuel, has to fill up this wing, go into the belly, and be transferred over to the other wing. Because they only fuel one wing. At least I never saw a photo of any where they're fueling both wings. There's your chart again. I'll keep showing that so you can reference it. There's your 12 by 24 foot pool. There they are filling one up from a 10,000 gallon tanker. There they are coming up out of the ground, filling up one wing, which, remember, it's got to be transferred to the other side. People say, how can a deception this big, how can so many people be involved? Look into secret societies. Look into their foot soldiers. And if only 1% of 7 billion people were involved, that's 70 million people. And follow the money. Trillions have been made off of jet fuel. Look at that wing. You decide, oh. There's a 10,000 gallon filling up one wing. Remember, you don't need combustible engines to run a lawnmower anymore, or to operate a fan. 2, 1. All it needs is air. And electric and battery operated automobiles. And they even have battery powered aircraft. At least they have the technology for it. And they show these, if you look it up. Everything I'm showing you, I found on a Google search. And you can find it too. Those don't take any fuel. They're showing you they had that technology. And what we're finding out, whatever technology they show us, they've had for decades. And here's some of jets that crash. The fuselage burnt, but all that fuel in the belly and in those wings didn't catch fire. Here's another one, fuselage. There's the turbine motor still intact, the wing still intact, didn't catch fire. Here's another one, fuselage in the back. If you look over here to your left, that wing's intact. Look here, little scorched, but it still didn't blow up. Here's from another wreck. One of your turbine engines. There was fire because there's smoke everywhere, but the turbine did not disintegrate. That will come in here in a minute in this video. Here's another one that survived the crash. There's your chart again, showing you how many gallons is supposedly in each wing and in the belly and the weight. Remember, 100,000 pounds per wing with the motor and the fuel. And how the numbers, the 666 and the 911, are all over this. There's what a 12 by 24 foot pool looks like again. Now, you decide if you believe that there's a swimming pool full of fuel in each of those wings and 2 swimming pools full of 12 by 24 foot pools in the belly of that. If not, that is a good cover story for what they've been doing for a couple of decades. The chemtrails. They claim that is just vapor, water vapor, coming from the fuel in a wore-out turbine motor. That is just water vapor. That's not even coming from the turbines. Or is it a converted jetliner spraying the masses? Spraying the masses. And for all you Trump fans that think he's your savior, he can do no wrong, he's a man of God, he's touring one of these chemical factories that are spraying you. And the cover story of 9/11, the 2 towers, was due to jet fuel that made those massive explosions that brought the towers down in a cloud of dust due to jet fuel. And the one photo we have an explosion of a jet fuel hitting the Pentagon, where, if you look, you will not even find any part of one turbine motor from that plane that disintegrated when it hit the Pentagon. So why would they want the masses to believe in jet fuel? Well, there's just 2 cover-up stories, plus follow the money. Here's your diagram again. And do you believe that one of those are in each wing and 2 of those in the belly of that jet airliner? Or that jet airliner?
No way. That's